Firstly, I'd really like to thank Water Sensitve SA for inviting me to come down here. It's a real privilege, and so I hope I'll entertain you and possibly even enlighten you, but I'm sure I'll be enlightened as well from the conversation afterwards. Water-sensitive urban design is really principles to help us achieve really good urban areas that offer value to the people who live there and also protect the environment at the same time. So we've got two different types of quantitative stormwater objectives. We've got the quantity component and a quality component. So the quantity component that we have left in our policy is a waterway stability objective, which is to preserve the 1 year flow in the waterway, the flow and velocity. So it's to protect the stream. The intention is to protect the stream from erosion. Whether it does that or not, I think it's probably, I think the science is pretty supportive that that's a good objective for that, to achieve that outcome. Load reduction objectives. So for those of you who don't know, when you talk about load reduction, that's you put a development on the ground, it's 80% reduction as if you've done nothing. So it's the unmitigated to the mitigated case is a percent reduction. Now this is a really interesting one. We also had in our Queensland Development Code, which is the code for buildings, a requirement for water savings targets, and that became known as the Rainwater tank policy because a really easy way to comply with that policy was to put a rainwater tank on every single house. And so it, as a code, so a way you could achieve it was to put a 5 kilolitre rainwater tank, plumb it up to the roof, then plumb it into, or connect to the roof, plumb it into an outdoor tap, a toilet and your cold water laundry, and you're done. You achieve that part of that code. I think rainwater tanks are really good. Were really good in Queensland. It was working. We were getting them on the ground and it was saving developers money. So what actually happened was, as soon as the rainwater tanks got removed from that code, council started sending plans back to the engineers, say, redesign your bioretention basins, they need to be 50% bigger. And that's happening. So the cost was then shifted back to the developer, and the developer didn't have space. So they hadn't made space for that because they had preliminary plans approved. And so this created a whole heap of tension between councils. It's not their fault because they'd approved plans with an assumption about rainwater tanks being present, and they got taken away. So it's not their fault. They're not getting the outcomes they're after. So the designers in good faith have come up with plans that had rainwater tanks. It's not their fault. And the developers, not their fault either. I mean, and so this is what happens. So this is what happens if decisions are made without thinking about the flow-on effects, pardon the pun. So directive reforms, this refers to policy and facilitative reforms. So we're focusing much more effort now on strengthening our organisations and working on incentives and other things to help people do it rather than making them do it. Because we've got the policy to make them do it. That's really important. You need that. So you can have incentives and you can have strong organisations and you can have champions, but if without a policy, nothing happens. So our policy in Queensland is driving still quite a lot of infrastructure that is compliant with the targets. So the targets are these load reduction objectives, and the outcome from that is infrastructure that delivers that. Now that's obviously really logical, but we were actually hoping for a bit more. So you can get infrastructure that delivers that, that's a basin in the corner of a development that doesn't add any other value. I don't think anybody here would really want that, but of course that's a completely logical outcome for a lot of people because all we need to comply with is the targets. We get really good results on big developments, almost always actually, really good results because it's easy to integrate. It's the small stuff that's really challenging. So on sort of a townhouse, this is kind of a typical outcome for a townhouse. It's not bad, like it's a little bioretention sort of out near the street. The townhouse development drains to it, and it's okay. It's kind of it's a decent little landscape feature. Sometimes nothing happens at all. Becomes a bit of a driver for offsets, particularly in the small infill developments like the 1 hectare little subdivided blocks where they're going to put 10 houses in there. That can be tricky to make it. Well, people say that it's tricky. I'm not sure. I suppose it can be. Certainly if you're not allowing really good streetscape stuff to happen, then building some sort of basin can be really tricky in a small development, I grant that. At the neighbourhood scale, so in the larger developments, actually most of the time it's really good, to be honest, because you have teams. I think it's because you have a team of people that are assembled. So the outcomes on big developments are usually quite good, I must say. I reckon integrating stormwater really well into parks is a really good idea. I'm not saying that it's easy, but it's a very good idea. We wrote a discussion paper and then came up with a framework some years ago. I think it's a good idea because you can it can add value to the parks. as long as you don't diminish the other qualities that those parks need to deliver, or the other services those parks need to deliver. So it can be quite tricky. But I think that it can achieve all those things if it's done really well. And this is one outcome in Brisbane that was achieved, and I think it's great. I mean, that park floods, so the water gets right up to here. And we've set some broader principles, and maybe objectives you'd call them, and then we created a framework that sits underneath it where you get points. So this is where the incentive part comes in. So you can actually, now we're not a body, we're not a regulator, we can't make anyone do this, but we can put it out there. So what we do is we put stuff out there to the world and we see if people like it. And we try to influence people that way. And councils are starting to pick this up, developers are starting to pick it up, or their consultants, and they're starting to try to use it and figure out how to make it work for them. Another thing, we're trying to be a lot less prescriptive. So our guidelines, for those of you who have seen our guidelines, they were in the past very prescriptive. We've tried to just give people ideas now. More and more we're just trying to say, here's an idea, why don't you try that? And we'll go, oh yeah, okay, I'd like to try that. Yeah, there's a big movement in Queensland towards off-site solutions, so stormwater offsets. Naughty word, but it's very challenging. I mean, offsets are going to be a part of our system in the future, but it's very challenging. Just like the infrastructure planning was before, councils delivering a range of projects is going to be really hard. That's my main message for that one.